Oh my God, there's Greg Norman.
Hello. Yeah.
We're here at Electrical Audio in the kitchen
This is our fancy espresso machine.
at the fancy espresso machine where we should be.
Yeah, we've gone through about 4 of those different versions of espresso machines, including inheriting a nice big fancy one from a friend who had a cafe, but it was just too much, too expensive, and we finally reduced it and got a nice new one, which seems to have lasted a while.
A little more middle of the road.
Yeah, it didn't require, $2,000 worth of maintenance. And we weren't pulling about 10 shots a minute, so we didn't need that. But, all the essentials: coffee, microwave, oven, spices, bench. This is our refrigerator where bands have sort of gotten in the habit of leaving thank you notes and other sort of notes over the years. And we kind of let it get overcrowded and then peel off a few to make room for more. But that sort of turned into a thing. But, yeah.
Cool.
This is the kitchen where most of the bands meet up and sort of like intermingle between the 2 studios once in a while, and that's the one sort of like cross-pollination place. And then here there's the dorm rooms where we do a lot of recording bands from overseas and out of town, and it's sort of a handy sort of office for them to hang out in and
let people spend the night.
Exactly, relax. And then this is the overcrowded lounge, which is kind of like people hang out and watch movies and kill time. When the drummer's done with all of his stuff, he can just plant himself in front of the TV and watch whatever he wants. But also it doubles as our leftover storage for equipment and everything, and turns into an everything room.
Loan pieces of gear. Yeah,
we end up like cleaning it up really well about twice a year, and then within a few weeks it just starts getting crowded full of other stuff. This is the tech shop where I live whenever I'm not recording bands. It's, you'll see all sorts of nice fancy equipment and microphones waiting.
Yeah, like this super duper modern Mac 7500-100.
Yeah, we just retired that. That was our main Pro Tools rig for, 25 years up until last month. No. That was all to run this Quantec QRS XL reverb that we got from Michael Jackson's live touring rig, or Steve did back in the 90s.
So you had to have the Mac to run that?
Yes, it's the way it's designed. It connects via serial port to a PC or a Mac. And within there, you just have all the parameters you can control and create your own sort of reverb and room simulation and all that sort of stuff. It's great, except for it's edge of technology, early '80s, digital reverb.
Yeah.
I can't wait to throw it out.
I'm sure somebody watching this will be like, "I'll take it."
Exactly.
Put it up for auction.
But yeah, it's a big mess.
As it should be.
Yeah, it's a big mess. It looks like a big mess, but I know where everything is, obviously, and there's all sorts of ongoing projects. And I got our 500 series mic preamps.
Oh yeah.
This is the last stage before I do the final tests and put the faceplate on and everything.
I'll put a link in the description so people can buy one of those.
Thank you.
Yes. Support the studio.
It's been ongoing project since 2012, 2011.
What do we have here?
This is the 2-channel rack version of the same preamp that we were making from 2012 on, and then this is the 500 version of it. So it took a friend sort of, we don't have a lot of 500, we didn't have any 500 gear here, just because we were flush with gear. And it took a friend pushing me to make one for him, and that got me the ball rolling. Like once he got that template down, then he can kind of do anything with it. So now I'm able to do that stuff. And here is the old office, which we turned into a transfer suite recently.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, like I'd say about a quarter of the work that we do here is just transfers, analog transfers. We were kind of known as having proficiency in dealing with analog tape technology, and we've always done transfers throughout the years, and we'd always have to wait until the studio was down to do all of, the bulk of these transfers, and finally we just set up a room to do it so we can we don't have to wait for an open day in the studio, and we can get it done a lot faster.
And I assume you do tape baking as well?
Yeah, we actually just ordered like a bigger oven that can handle a lot more tape than our food dehydrator could. We could only do about 3 or 4 2-inch reels at a time with that thing, and the bake times have gotten longer and longer, so it's the bottleneck for doing like big transfer projects with dozens of reels. But yeah, we're stoked about that actually getting done, just because now it can just happen whenever we're free, as opposed to whenever the studio is free.
More excess.
Yeah, leftover stuff that'll end up like either staying out here and being used a la carte or in the rack somewhere. There's always like rack gear coming and going, and we have to make room and modify the patch bay and all that sort of stuff. And here is the control room for Studio B. This is the first of the 2 studios that we opened in 1997. It's a little bit more simple layout, a lot of equipment, no frills kind of sort of setup, but there are some oddball pieces of gear that we built ourselves or modified to like work with our workflow a little better. But yeah, this is so we had this studio open for 1 year before we finished Studio A. And this was going to be the kind of more simple, straightforward rock, production studio. And the other studio would be the more full-fledged, do whatever you want in that studio.
I've seen it many times online, and here we are in person finally.
Yeah, this big cavernous room, which a lot of the interior acoustic design was, this is obviously rough and as is, but the existing ceiling and roof used to be right here. You can see the crappy brick sort of stop here, and then the newer cinder block extend up, and that's the walls.
You had built up.
Yeah, the walls we raised another level to match the second floor for the rest of the building. We installed the ceiling, which is on a slant, and it's a diffuser, a rough diffuser, and put in these structural steel members and to keep the walls from falling down. And the idea was we'd see what this sounds like, and if it sounded great, there's Taylor Hales,
Hey, how you doing?
Another engineer and office manager here. We'd see how this would work and how people liked it, and with the expectation that we'd build out, finish out in front of this wall, with whatever we wanted to, but people fell in love with the way this sounded just as is, so we kept it as is. Oops. That's a little vocal booth, which also served as a little sound
lock
for the outside. You can go straight to the alley from there. And here, all of our microphones, almost all the microphones are stored in Studio A or Studio B in these cabinets. And you can kind of just see it's organized roughly from like dynamic mics to ribbon mics to condenser mics to tube condenser mics.
And no shortage of the Josephsons, of course.
You can see all the banged up sort of prototypes that we went through over time. Hundreds of stick hits. That's the whole design criteria, is it could take a whack from a drumstick and survive it. And so it just evolved to this heavy duty sort of housing for this really nice capsule and nice hi-fi circuitry. One of the earlier versions just had like a nut, this like sort of brass nut that was sort of mounted on there. It was kind of an interesting look, but a lot of design revisions, and we got a couple of them here that are a little different than the stock version. But yeah, we try to have an abundance of microphone types so that we have like enough for both studios to run and enough for, microphones to go down, because ribbons are like drum heads. You have to replace them pretty regularly. If they're getting used often, they get stretched out and lose their youth. So like the Coles 4038, we have I think 8 of them, and there's always like 2 that are blown, and we wait till there's like 3, and then we send them all off to Kohl's to get re-ribboned and magnetized and done right. And just usually that would wait till someone goes to Europe, and we use them as a drug mule for the microphones, just to bring it over to save $700 in shipping. Here's the dead room in Studio B.
Definitely very dead,
Yeah.
with an immense amount of guitar pedals.
Yeah, if you're recording studio for long enough, you end up just with a ton of pedals. But you end up like pedals and keyboards. It seems like people just sort of like foist onto a studio owner. You know, I'm leaving town. I can't carry all my stuff with me. I don't need this anymore. You take it, kind of thing. But yeah, a lot of people want to send their pedals for us to try out, and they end up here, and bands use them, and then they're like, I want to buy this, and it's like, all right, you know, you can buy it, and it's a nice like little ad for them, or sometimes I'll just buy it from them here, and then we just get a replacement. So there's like a nice sort of cycle of like helping out other companies as well. But,
What's through this store?
so this is to the loading dock,
Oh, okay.
and it's also the way to Studio A. But you can see here kind of like
It's like a walk-in refrigerator style.
yeah, that's exactly, a plunger refrigerator style door closer. The door itself is someone's idea, you know, it's filled with concrete, and it's, you know, plywood and concrete, custom made, but nothing really fancy. It's all about gasketing and weight.
Now, being that I grew up in New Mexico, the Adobe brick
Yeah.
is something kind of, you know, near and dear to my upbringing.
We
And here it is.
you can kind of see how the 2 different buildings within a building come together with just a little bit of an air gap that eventually, you know, like if we could go back in time and change that, I would add, you know, 24 inches between the 2 walls. But yeah, the whole idea is the studio rooms are all made of Adobe brick, and they are kind of living on their own foundations that go into the basement foundation, and their entire structure is within the outside 1920s Chicago building. And come through here, this is the live room for Studio A, also nicknamed Center Field.
I was going to say center field, right? Yeah.
There's a jazz session going on in here for now, but a lot more guitars stored in here just because of more space for it. A couple of pianos. A lot more floor space to do a lot of more bigger bands, or also just sometimes we'll have an orchestra in here, all sorts of different arrangements. This room's pretty flexible for whatever you got going on. But most of the time, if it's a rock band, amplifiers will be out here and drums will be in the smaller live room, which is in there, kind of like how they have it set up today. But a handful of mics sort of kept in this space, but this is what our former office manager, when we'd walk through the studio, he would call Studio B black and white, Wizard of Oz, and Studio A color Oz, just because it's a little bit prettier.
And, you know, for those of you watching this who've seen this studio in other videos and other pictures, it is pretty fantastic in person, I have to say.
Well, thanks.
To be here.
Yeah, the floor, this is all recycled lumber from when we were doing demolition on the building. Like, it was an old lithography plant, and then this was the kitchen wall paneling, which was made of oak.
And this is an interesting thing that I've always been fascinated by, is how this was constructed. Oh, of course, that's a cool little detail there. But can you talk about how this floor is constructed and how that relates to the low end of the room?
Yeah, so because these Adobe brick walls are standing on their own brick walls that go into the basement, and this floor and the control room and the other dead room are floated. we had to cut a relief to lift the walls away from lift the floor away from the walls so that they're not like bumping into the walls. And that left us with this gap around the wall, which kind of gave us the idea that we could have this air vent go into the basement, which all the basement rooms have the same footprint. So you have the isolation from basement room, and you could have an escape path for some low-end energy, especially for a smaller space in a corner. If you have an amplifier stuck in that corner, it'd build up in a right angle corner, it would build up 3 times or approximately 3 times. And here you have sort of an invisible floor, and one of the barriers is kind of invisible acoustically because the gap is so big. So you don't have that buildup like you would normally have in a totally enclosed room of this size. In a sense, the room is kind of twice as big as it looks because there's the air volume of the room underneath us that's contributing to it. And that works out really well for the small dead room. You can have these roaring heavy bass amplifiers inside there, and it doesn't have that double up kind of quality that you get in a small space when you're putting a huge loud amplifier in that small room. And and there's other sort of bass trapping ideas behind the fabric walls that we have. We have these dangling chipboard, sort of like a curtain of chipboards wrapping the room with insulation attached to it, and they're hung by chains, and you can kind of like shake them, and it sort of like propagates as a wave, and that shakes with the bass energy or whatever loud energy is going on and kills some of that sort of energy, and then it hits the brick wall and tries to come back through that before it comes back into the room again.
Can you talk a little bit about why we're seeing these sporadic pieces of wood in the Adobe?
Yeah, so this stoner came up from New Mexico to teach the masons how to lay Adobe brick and taught us how to lay Adobe brick. And basically, these are nailers for anything you want to mount to the brick wall without having to drill into this sort of basically a soft brick. It's just, you could take a little hammer and start digging at it and it would just fall to pieces. It's not like a concrete or solid brick kind of density. It's really just, it's kind of a porous, soft material, but it's super heavy. So these are nicknamed gringos, they call them. And they just sort of attach, the wall frame or the door frames and window frames to the wall. They kind of anchor them into the Adobe brick wall, and they act as nailers, so you could just mount things to them if you need to. So
right,
that's their main sort of utility. But
that's the name is funny.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, gringo is kind of almost a derogatory term for white people in Hispanic culture.
I'm not sure why that's associated with that, but yeah, it's like a. So you would just put them up, predicting that you would be mounting things to it, and obviously you need to mount wherever you got to mount things.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, the Adobe bricks are about 25 pounds a piece, and really dense and really heavy, and they're irregular in shape, which is important. There's no resonance to them like there would be with a cinder block, and that building material it's just a solid clump of a wall as opposed to like several bricks that have the same shape and size and have a resonance. And so again, it was like an idea I think Steve and Bob Weston had to, just for the core base of a wall material that would prevent sound from getting through. And then again, we built it to see what it sounds like, and if we like it, we'll leave it, and if we don't like it, we'll just change it and build out from inside, but we liked it, so we left it. And it's a cheap material. It was kind of expensive moving all of it up here, but it's cheaper than like common brick or cinder block, so it's kind of like a nice cheap building material.
And has such acoustic qualities to it in terms of density.
Yeah.
I guess concrete probably would have been more expensive, right?
Well, yeah, or just like a traditional style would be to get cinder block walls and fill them with sand or whatever you do, but that doesn't really stop the transmission very well because it's such a rigid material that you can tap one side and hear it on the other. Whereas here, if you whacked the one side with a hammer, you'd hear a thud, and it wouldn't transmit so well into the next room, which is super handy.
Nice line of sight here. We're in Alcatraz, looking into Centerfield.
Mm-hmm. And that's Kentucky room.
And this is Kentucky room.
Uh-huh.
Okay, interesting.
And these are just nicknames that came up during construction. That was like, this room's called Alcatraz because the trenches we were digging in the basement for the Adobe brick walls behind these fabric walls created a little island here. And then in the middle of the island, we had to dig a big hole for the steel to hold up an I-beam, to hold up this floating floor. And there was a person that looked like he was just digging a hole in the middle of this island, and we just nicknamed it Alcatraz. And it's just he looked like a prisoner. But yeah, and then through here, it's just the modest sort of lounge for Studio A. Always stuff everywhere.
You have to have a Rod Stewart cutout.
Yes, that's appeared on many records.
Hello, Rod.
Many records.
Ah, another room that many of us are very familiar with.
Yeah, this is the very spacious and comfortable control room for Studio A. We had, back in the era of smoking, we had the bright idea of having the HVAC returns in the rear of the room to keep all the smoke like traveling from the front to the back, and all the farts to travel to the back. And there's positive pressure air conditioning blowing out into the back of the rack, so air is pushing out of the racks, so you never have any dust or smoke or anything propagating into the equipment, which is handy. But no one smokes anymore, so that's good. This is a fancy console that Martin Sound built for us before they stopped making consoles. It's the Neotech Elite that's got some custom modifications that we had done at the factory.
You got your Ampex remote built into the center piece there.
Yeah. What else is weird about this place? It's hard to remember. When we were wiring up the studio, I was doing the snakes for the racks, and I remember like sitting cross-legged on the floor here doing all the connectors, and I showed up at one day at 9 in the morning and kept doing it until 5 the next day, just soldering connectors. That was when I was young and could just stay up through the night. I was just excited.
Okay, there's the new well, I don't know how new it is, but it's, you know, it's new on my radar, the new mid-side decoder that is on sale, if I believe. Yeah,
we just sort of build them to order because they're not the kind of thing that just flies off the shelf. But we've been making those since 2008, I think. Or we made them for our studio, and then people would come in and use them and ask us to make them for them. And so
now in the current version, does the light change like that on the current version?
No, I got 100 of those LEDs. I think they're made for like those Christmas trees, those little fiber optic Christmas trees. I got 100 of them for like $5 at the Midwest Buy and Sell. No, American Science and Surplus, which is a fun little electronics store in town. But once I ran through them, we just stuck to red after that. Some people like them, some people hate them. I thought it was like hilarious to just have it like be this obnoxious thing, like on all the preamps that we make.
Oh yeah.
The first 25 of them have that rotating sort of color wheel thing, and the chips in them go bad, so they sometimes freak out and it gets really intense. So I think like so all the ones I make now are just gonna be red. But yeah, if you got one of those first 25, you're special.
Extra special.
Exactly.
And what do we have here in this picture?
That is a birthday, or I think it's a birthday present that like a birthday card that I made for Steve back in 1998. And that was like it's just a photo of the basement before we started building the structural concrete block walls to support the Adobe brick. We had just dug out the trenches and backfilled it with concrete, and those are the pieces of rebar sticking up. And I think Steve was out of town for 3 or 4 weeks while we were digging all these trenches. There's like 8 or 9 of like us. There used to be a construction crew, about 8 or 9 people, and all friends, you know, friends of Steve, friends of each other, and like we spent about 3.5 weeks digging these trenches out. It was like an immense amount of work. We just filled up dumpster after dumpster with this like moist clay, you know, from Chicago underneath the building. And So when he left, it was a normal floor, and then we dug out the trenches. It was like crazy labor. We were all super bulked up and strong after it was all over, and we backfilled it, filled it with concrete, and that's pretty much like what it looked like when he came back, and it looked like nothing really happened. He's just like, oh, what did you guys spend 4 weeks doing?
What have you guys been up to for like 4 weeks?
Just put this rebar in the floor? Okay, great. What else?
These eventide delays are made custom for you guys, right?
Yeah, that's something Steve wanted to do for a long time, and we hooked up with a couple of people from Eventide, and they sort of made this version of their delay, which they have a 500 series delay that's a really nice, parametric delay that has lots of features, and they kind of reworked that to give us a straight stereo delay with like a big display and real simple straight delay. That's the basic key feature, that it just goes down to microseconds and goes up to 10 seconds, but just to have a stereo delay that doesn't do anything else, that was something Steve wanted to have done for a long time. And
is that something that you're primarily using when you have a bass cabinet and a DI and you're trying to delay the DI a little bit?
Yeah, that's one use that is super handy for, and delaying other, just whenever you want to do things like, if you have like a single guitar and you want to spread it out a little bit, with a room mic, you can delay it. And same thing as Steve would, famously delay his room mics for the drums. And
right, which is, something I think many of us have stolen that idea now.
Yeah. And he'd use like the H3000, the Eventide H3000 for that a lot. And but this, just something simple, you can just go to it, turn it on, and there it is. And it's super intuitive. But it's like,
the display is amazing.
Right, I feel like
how large it is.
Yeah, it's like The Price is Right.
It's like The Price is Right.
Yeah, like I want to get the green version, the blue version.
And down here, you'll notice, friends, also for sale is one of the electrical DIs you may have seen.
You can see my prototype Bluetooth player.
Yeah.
So we're eventually going to try to get like I thought it'd be funny to make a 500 series Bluetooth player for studio control rooms. Would be super handy. And I'll do this, and I'll try to make it as functional, like brain dead as possible. It just has one button on it and tells you what's happening. And it's like, we'll sell it for like $200. It'll be hilarious. It'll be like, it's such a stupid thing to sell. And and then I think some other company came out with one recently, and I'm like, damn. I just wanted something. Everybody's got a 500 series thing now, so I just figured to just throw that in. And as long as the radio, the RF doesn't get in the way, then you'd be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're trying out a couple different designs just to see what works and lasts long.
Is the basement something we should see?
You could, yeah. Might as well. People like nerding out. It's more of a junkyard than.
Bye, Rod.
You have to watch out because there's steel.
Okay.
It's your foot.
I'll do my best not to fall down the stairs.
Yeah. You got I-beams that'll basically give you a new eyebrow.
Oh yeah.
So watch out for that.
Hence, yeah. See the foam, friends.
Yeah. So this is the main wood shop. This room and the other room, we don't do much woodworking stuff anymore. But most of the furniture upstairs was built here by this guy Dave Duvall, who used to work here for 15 or 20 years. And he'd be down here making furniture and other little tidbits for the studio. And for the most part, the ethos of the studio is if we can do it in-house, we'll do that. Like the mid-side matrix, mic preamps, and other stuff, other little gadgets that we just sort of need at the studio. If we can do it ourselves, great. Try to get it done that way. But he made these oak chairs from recycled wood that don't creak, and they're the very solid sort of chairs that just don't make any creaking noise. So that's kind of a handy thing. But obviously, after 27 years, they can break. Over here is our isolation transformer for the studios.
Ah.
and the main shutoffs for the 2 different studios. And underneath this piece of wood,
This is where Jimmy Hoffa's buried.
yeah, most of them. There's a 10-foot copper pole for our ground stake that we had installed, augured out, and so we ended up with the best ground in the neighborhood, which actually caused problems. And
How so?
just because other companies in the neighborhood would find, a path to our ground, and either through the plumbing or other sort of physical, interaction between the buildings. And it took some work to sort of make sure that we're completely decoupled from the city and decoupled from the neighbors, so that they're not like, right now it's all residential, but we used to have some industrial neighbors, and, with a lot of ground current, it could possibly make its way through plumbing and other, the earth and other sort of paths to this ground stake, which is actually the better reference of, for the whole neighborhood. We discovered sort of through different ghost busting techniques that, we needed to lift certain things and make sure we're decoupled from the neighborhood in the right way, in a legal way, and in a way that's the most silent sort of operating way. But like all the outlets up in the studios have their independent sort of isolated grounds, and each one of those ground wires goes to a bus bar, which ends up in this ground stake. And every few years we have to make sure that all those bolts are tightened, so there's like a nice 0 ohm connection between the upstairs outlets and down here.
The Uber ride over here, I crossed over a body of water. Mm-hmm. What's the water table like over here?
Kind of clay, wet clay kind of earth right here by the river. Mm-hmm. You went over the river. It's not really like you're talking as far as like flood goes, or
yeah. Do you ever see any moisture up here in the basement?
No, I mean we do when we have a sub pump back there and a drain tile around the basement, so that like the water pressure underneath the basement floor is relieved by going into the sub pump and being pumped out into the sewer. But like, if the power goes out or the sub pump dies, that pressure, if it's been raining a lot, it builds up and it'll seep through the cracks on the concrete floor. But it's never been like flooded here. Okay. We're a little bit high off the ground. I mean, we're a little bit higher, so I think we haven't had like the sewer back up into the studio, or anything like that, which is nice.
Excellent.
Which is nice.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah, especially we have like drums, and I mean, most things are kept off the floor that are meaningful or that could get destroyed by water.
Oh.
So here's our kind of drum storage area. We usually have a couple of kits up in the studio, but most of them are stored down here. Some old Ludwig kits. There's a silver club date kit that's somewhere not here right now.
Oh, beautiful. Look at this. Absolutely gorgeous.
The orange psychedelic, or I call it the puke drum kit from the 60s. It sounds really good.
Very, very vomit.
These are these Jenkins Martins drums, which we're big fans of. It's acrylic, kind of like if you like Vista Lights, but better. This have like a very well-made drum kit that's been really popular with a lot of bands. Very predictable and good sounding.
And look at this. This is like a late 60s Ludwig.
Yeah, that's the club date kit I was talking about, the silver sparkle. Like 66, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've got a green sparkle Ludwig like that. Not a club date kit, but
yeah, I got
that era.
I looked at a garage sale, got a red sparkle mid 60s kit, 3-piece Ludwig kit with the original canvas bags that for $70.
Wow.
Yeah, but I gave it to an actual drummer because it was wasted on me. Let me think. Yeah, let go through there. More refrigerator doors.
Oh yeah.
That was like, we just somehow found a bunch of them and think like, oh, then maybe they'll be soundproof. They're not soundproof at all. They're really lightweight. Drum heads, more garbage, more woodworking stuff.
Oh, and some raw Adobe bricks, right?
Yeah, those we kept around in case we needed to do some patches or repairs. And you can see like when they're just in the raw, it's just dirt basically. Yeah. There's not much to them.
Dirt and a little bit of straw.
Yeah, and they just left out in the desert to dry out. A lot of wood leftover scraps. Drum heads we keep around because they're, you can cut them into dampeners if you need to, and it's always a handy thing. It's hard to get rid of stuff, as everybody knows.
Oh yeah.
It pays to hoard.
Someday somebody is going to need this piece of wood.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely. I'll come down here and grab stuff. I mean, I've been starting to burn it now, like in backyard fires. It's been a long time.
Tape storage.
This would be our long-term tape storage.
Oh, wow.
We pretty much reduced it to just employees and Steve's stuff.
Shellac. Oh, there we go. Lots of shellac.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the fresh tape comes in here. We have a couple of distribution hubs in the rest of the building where you get tape, but the main 2-inch and 1/2 inch, which we'll usually buy like a bunch of at once and just have it stored down here and then go through it and then buy another big batch, as opposed to just buying 2 reels at a time.
So these days it's pretty much ATR in the US and RTM in Europe, right?
That's correct.
RTM does have a distribution hub in Livonia, Michigan, of all places, I've learned.
Oh yeah. Don Morris, he used to be like the MTech and BASF guy.
Yeah.
You can see the 2 walls between the control room. I'll turn the light on so you can look. But these 2 structural walls that are holding up the separated Adobe brick walls between the control room and the Kentucky room.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Again, wish we put 10 inches of the gap. There's lots of stuff we did right, and some stuff wish we could go back and add a couple inches. We're we need every square inch, which we do, but...
Are we underneath Alcatraz?
We're underneath the control room.
Oh, okay.
And it's cold down here because the air conditioner, you can see the duct work. This is all for the racks.
Okay.
And the duct work goes into the different racks, and it goes into the amp rack here.
And
that's the plate.
Yeah, you got your plate.
And then that's the patch bay punch block behind you.
And you got the Neotech power supplies, power amps to some of the speakers, and then the punch block.
Yeah, that's where the patch bay for Studio A lives. And so whenever we change anything, I'm a big fan of, I know people hate punch blocks, but I love them.
Yeah.
Because you can just make anything happen that you want to have happen. And there's lots of freedom to move stuff around, but...
Now, why is there a watch tied around there?
I don't know. I'm not sure. That's someone found that maybe. Here's the BX20.
Ah, the AKG spring.
And then there's a 48 volt power supply for phantom power that we have on the patch bay. So there's some microphones, condenser microphones, that have really high output. So you could actually just plug them into this phantom power point. And then it's got DC blocking on the output of it. You can plug it right into a line level piece of equipment. So like an Earthworks mic, which is super hot output, or something that just has a high output, you can just plug straight into a compressor and use it directly.
Huh. Kind
of handy. There's a famous water heater that
is this
electrical audio is known for.
Oh yeah?
No.
Well, this is new to me. This famous water heater.
Yeah, no.
Take it in, friends, because
if you want a real studio, you gotta get a water heater just like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you can now buy these used on Reverb for $5,000.
Yeah, this one's made in Germany. Only the best. Spare no expense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, watch your head on this.
All right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So these are all this power conduit to the racks. It's sort of an example of how intense the electrical routing is. Every outlet has its own ground wire, which gets really thick after a while, and jumps over to here to the main panel for the Studio A outlets. But this is all ground wires behind here. It's maybe I can get.
Oh my gosh, this is a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be. Okay, so those are all ground wires for the racks?
Yep, every outlet has an isolated ground on the safety ground, And here's your, I think, 6-gauge wire that jumps over to the ground stake. But yeah, for every outlet you see, there's an individual 10-gauge ground wire coming off it.
Oh yeah, just like your average home studio.
Yeah, you can do this at home. There's probably a YouTube video on how to do it, I'm sure.
Oh, sure. The design of all of this was a combination of Steve and Bob Weston, and is that accurate?
Yeah, like the rough outline. I think like Steve, he'd work in like hundreds of places, flying around the world, gathering as much, actual sort of experience hours in these places, and going to places that were like really elaborately designed, like down to the T, like with quote unquote perfect acoustics and everything. And I think his takeaway was like his favorite studios were not studios that they obsessed over, like Abbey Road's Studio 2, like the Beatles, Abbey Road studio. Like, there isn't, it's a big rectangle with some minimum sort of acoustic treatment.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't leave me down there. I think I would have gotten lost.
Yeah, I just ditch you.
Yeah. See you, Matt.
There's a lot of people down there that haven't come back. But yeah, he went to a lot of places that were really obsessed over as far as just the design goes, and got the impression that like, yeah, we could do that, but like as soon as you throw a piano in there, or throw all your equipment that you're going to have just stored in the studio, it all changes. So there's not really like much of a reason to really try to get like too hung up on the details. So like the rough footprint of the studio they laid out, and then from that point on, and the materials that he wanted to use, like the Adobe brick, and just in general, like the layout of the studio he had sort of worked out. But from there on till as we were building, all these sort of problems would just get solved as we would build it. And it wasn't really like it's not like there was like too much stress over the like fine-tooth design of it ahead of the time. It would just be sort of solved in the moment. But yeah.
Well, very cool. Does that conclude our tour?
I think so.
Oh, right.
I'm trying to think if there's anywhere we didn't go. That's interesting.
Well, let's sit down and drink some coffee and have a chat
All right.
with you, Greg.
Sounds fun.
All right.